the big picture with this case was, what is the definition of accounting records? A lot of construction contracts, if not all, are going to define or mention accounting records. Appropriate accounting records are to be maintained. But what does that mean? What do accounting records mean? So we had this case where we were engaged by a government, their legal counsel, and they had a dispute with a utility company that was doing work for them on a series of roads that were being built and needed related utility work. And that utility work was being charged to the government because they were moving some roads, and it wasn't the utility company's fault that these utilities needed to be moved. It was because of the government's desire to build these roads. So they had a contract with the government to move these utilities. Well, it spelled that they would, you know, required them to maintain certain accounting records and provide that to the county government for payment of those charges related to that utility movement work. Well, the question became, what is accounting records? They produced Excel spreadsheets that showed charges, and they believed that was sufficient accounting records. They didn't produce the underlying invoices. They didn't produce time cards. They didn't produce payroll information regarding the employees that are on the project that they're charging the county for. They thought they could get away with it. Well, there ended up being a big dispute. And Shawn, why don't you, because I know that you ended up testifying
But
on
yeah, I was
this.
laughing because my deposition was the Friday before Christmas, like about ten years ago. But and my deposition was 5.5 hours too, like on the definition of accounting records. Because like I said, it's a very this is the whole point is like you need to have, sometimes these contracts, if they can be more, defined specifically. But like I said, they were trying to make, a spreadsheet's definitely not, you know, the definition of supporting accounting records. And they didn't have any of the supporting records that because the biggest issue in this case is like the first three times they're okay with them upcharging 30-40% over budget, but to the fourth time, then my client kind of got frustrated with the situation. And so, they asked for them to provide the supporting accounting records and they didn't have them. So they ultimately settled the case before arbitration, but I did have to go through a deposition. But like I said, it was a very interesting case because, you know, the county and this particular vendor, utility, they had several of these cases. They probably had 6 or 7 of these cases. And so it was because, and so, the idea of how people define things, in a lot of the cases that we get involved with, the accounting definitions are critical to the outcomes of the case and the interpretations
So if
of
you're
those.
an attorney that's reviewing contracts or writing contracts, the more specificity that you can provide to defining what accounting records are, and that requires underlying supporting documentation, such as invoices, such as vendor contracts, such as labor records, timekeeping records, be a little more detailed, because then you can use that to come back and say, hey, your spreadsheet, which you claim, hey, it's an Excel spreadsheet that shows accounting entries. That's suffice. That's an accounting record. The argument would be that's not. Make it a original underlying source accounting record, not a compilation of data from your accounting records that you're saying, well, this is also an accounting record. Well, we would say, no, that's a summary of your underlying accounting records and not the actual accounting record itself.